Hello. Now that you've completed the first couple of deliverables for the final unit, I wanted to give you a little bit more direct instruction on what we're calling the critical reflection essay. So within this video, what I'm going to do is give you some background on what critical reflection is, why it's important, and then go into the different parts so that hopefully you'll feel really clear about how to at least write the working draft of this. So, critical reflection is a way of using writing in order to better understand experiences. So, it's something that is often used to reflect on experiences that people may have had in the field or doing civic engagement or doing research. But essentially, it's not just, oh, I'm not just remembering what I did, but by saying I'm critically reflecting on it, I'm looking at what I did, why it matters, and what I should take away from this. You might recognize some of this format from what you've done for writer's memos. And this is a similar concept, but what we're doing that's a little bit different is bringing secondary sources in to help with the critical part of that reflection. So there's lots of ways to do critical writing. What I've done here is I've adapted somebody called Borton. They have a framework of what, so what, and now what. And the idea is that you're looking at what you did, why it matters, and what you'll do next. And you'll notice here it's kind of an infinite diagram because you're not just drawing, hard and fast lines between these sections, but you are going to refer back. If for some reason you felt compelled to Google Borton's framework, you would find the what, so what, and now what, but you would see that the questions are different than the ones I'm posing. Again, I've adapted it a little bit for our situation. The first section of your paper is going to be the what section. This section should be primarily descriptive. So you should be writing about what you've gone through, what you've noticed, what you've observed over the past few weeks. Obviously, the past few weeks have been life-changing and world-changing, and you're not going to squeeze it all into the first third of your essay. So you do want to tailor that reflection to address the specific lens that you might be looking at through your optional reading. So, for example, if you read one of the education pieces, you might focus your description on what have you noticed about schooling, right? What have you can look at your own experiences with the college closing, or if that still feels a little bit too close and too real to write about it because you're literally dealing with that right now. You can also look to the schools closing in your communities. If you have younger siblings, cousins, kids that you take care of, how is this affecting them? How is this affecting their families, their teachers, all of that good stuff. Once you have your what section done, and I would estimate that that would take up approximately a third of your paper. It's not a perfect formula, but once you have that in place, you're going to want to move on to the so what section. And this is where I want you to start working with the articles you've read, both the ones that we read together as a group, the overviews of the Spanish flu, the backstory in the New York Times, and then whatever you did as your choice article, and start to do the reflection that's going to be what makes this critical instead of just describing what you've been through. And so some of the ways that you can approach this are, you can answer what are the similarities between now and 100 years ago? Why does the comparison that you make matter? So if the Stanley Cup was canceled in 1918 and the Stanley Cup was canceled in 2020, one of the questions that came up in one of my classes was, would the cup, what does this do about the legitimacy of the cup, right? Are there are there contingencies that should have been in place? Are there similarities, difference? What's at stake for you and what's at stake for the world? There aren't any right or wrong answers to this so what. This is kind of just like doing a little bit of mixing in so much as you're bringing in, hey, here's what I've noticed about 2020. Here's what I read about 1918. Holy kerbucket, here's why that is interesting. And there's not a way to get this, necessarily wrong, but you do just want to ask as many so what's and why does that matters as you can. Once you have your so what in place, then you're going to get into what next. And this is really where this is the heart, and this is the meat and potatoes, part of in the food metaphor of reflective writing, in so much as this is where you're going to say, hey, I noticed this, I thought about this. Here's what I think needs to happen. Here's what we should do differently next time. Here are the lessons that we should take away. Here is what I see differently as a result of not just having this experience, but doing the critical work on my experience that I did in the so what section of my paper. So why did things happen the way they did? Were there lessons we could have learned, should have learned, need to learn? And again with this section, and I think I've said this on every slide, but you are organizing your ideas around the general perspective or the angle that you read about in your optional essay, because again, this could be the most massive question on the planet, and so I do want you to stay focused as best you can. So, in putting together this presentation, I've tried to anticipate as many potential questions as I can. For the purposes of the working draft, we're aiming for 3 to 5 pages. They don't have to be perfect, but I do want you to have some attempt at what, so what, and what next to be in place. A lot of my students tend to worry about transitions and flow. Don't worry about that for the time being. This is really the thinking draft. So even if you have subject headings in your paper, what, so what, and what next, that will help me when we start to conference get my brain around what you're thinking and how you're interpreting this assignment. And that will be really helpful. It is helpful, I think, to have a thesis of sorts in your introduction. The reason being is you're not making necessarily a yes-no argument in this paper, but a thesis also plays the role of helping you organize your thoughts and helping orient your reader towards your project. So for thinking about a thesis here, you might develop what I am kind of imagining to be called a procedural thesis. I'm pretty sure I just made that up, but let's go with it. And essentially in this procedural thesis, you're laying out the methodology of your paper. So by comparing how blank, sports, education, globalization, social justice, women's rights have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic to how these same things were affected by the Spanish flu in 1918, I argue that we should blank. So what should we do or think as a result of this comparison? It's not the greatest thesis on the planet. If something, more organic comes to your mind, go for it. But this is a nice way to kind of orient your reader and help you see where the project is going, because I think that you can see then how the different pieces of the paper will come together. You do need an introduction, you do need a conclusion. Neither of those are super important for the working draft. And you do need to sort of organize your paragraphs as well as you can. But the real goal here is to have those 3 parts in place so that when you meet with me, we can hash out how to smooth them out and polish it up. As always, questions, call, email, make an appointment, come to office hours, or text.